Well, the continent of Africa might not be the epicenter of COVID-19, but unfortunately, the continent of Africa is seen as the epicenter of underdevelopment because of bad leadership and poor governance and graft and corruption. So this outrage right now is well-founded, and I'm equally outraged. But I think the French just made the mistake of thinking or saying out loud what many big pharma companies and countries in the West are thinking about Africa. This did not start the other day. African bodies have been used as lab rats for many years for big pharma, whether it's about HIV. In fact, I remember a few months ago in a country further south, they were actually encouraging pre-sexually active young women or who are at risk of sexual activity to try the pre-exposure prophylaxis. This is linked to HIV and AIDS. And I was completely amazed at how our governments allow all manner of tests to happen. Think back to Egypt and Depo-Provera, birth control, many years ago, where Big Pharma was also testing the birth control method on women there. So this is not something that is going to start with COVID-19. It's been prevalent on the continent for many years. And until we rise up and say African bodies count, African bodies matter, we will not allow our men, women, boys, girls, babies to be used, then this will happen. So of course it is completely wrong, and I'm so grateful for the outrage, and may they never bring their trials here. But unfortunately, we have a history of allowing, or our governments have a history of allowing our citizens or its citizens to be used as lab rats in such experiments.
This was 30 seconds only. Tell me what you think about this. And African leaders have been meeting, trying to come up with a continental plan to this.
Well, the statements by those two French doctors must be praised and condemned in the same vein. The condemnation is only that they said something which has been represented as a racist statement, that Africa is made up of guinea pigs, is made up of rats, so wherever you have anything new, take it to Africa. But it must be praised because it's a reminder to Africa that as countries, or rather public sector and private sector, we do not...
praised. Did you say that?
Yes, it must be praised because, reason being, as the public and private sectors in Africa have not invested in research and development. Have you had an organization from Kenya like Cambridge coming up with a vaccination to go and test in Europe? Why can't we fund our African bodies, flood them with resources, have those PhD level doing very serious research so that we can come up with these vaccinations and go test them in Europe or America and the US?
Why can't they test it in France?
Well, when you come...
saw 1,300 people die in a single day.
As a scientist, when you come up with a product, it's at your pleasure to test it anywhere. You can do it in France. Like for this one, they've indicated they're going to test in other parts of the world alongside Africa. But even as for as a nation, for us in Africa, let's do the same thing. Instead of testing them in Kenya, we go test them in Europe.
Hesbon, 30 seconds only, please. The hashtag Africans are not lab rats has been trending on Twitter. What's your take on this proposal, suggestion by those two French doctors?
I think two things, Ben, that these French doctors should be condemned with the strongest terms possible, and Africans are not guinea pigs. So to that extent, we just need to condemn them as we ask African leaders to come up with a way forward. Secondly, I think this is a wake-up call. Why is it that we live in a continent and anything that happens in this continent has the decisions made in European cities? We have researchers of international repute in Africa, and I think such condescending attitudes by researchers from Europe and the Western world should spur our researchers into thinking of how we can come up with solutions to problems that bedevil Africa and the rest of the world, so that we also make those decisions that this is where we are going to test these viruses, antiviruses that we are developing. It should not be about Europe. How can we reverse this conversation so that we are the ones deciding we are testing something?
Very quickly, please.
Ben, is it me?
Yes.
Ben, the thing that I would like to just underscore is African dignity. What we've done for a long time, because of our mismanagement, because of how we've placed ourselves in the international stage, Africa has always been the dumping ground of anything, whether it is called the dark continent or the third world or whatever it is. We've always been the recipients of that. One of the things that COVID-19 must make Kenyans, Africans wake up to is it's time we created an identity for Africans. Asians have an identity because of China and Singapore and South Korea. Africans do not, and the only reason we do not is because we keep thinking that if we borrow ideas from the West, specifically from IMF and World Bank, we will somehow develop, while every country that has ever developed in the last 60 years has done so in defiance, not in because of the IMF.